Thanks, everybody. And again, good morning. Appreciate you taking time to join us for the Future of Workforce and Downtown DSM webinar. I'm Tiffany Tauschek, and I'm the COO here at the Greater Des Moines Partnership. And I also wear the hat as president of Downtown DSM, Inc., which is a subsidiary of the Greater Des Moines Partnership. So today's presentation will cover the initial results of the DSM Workforce Trends and Occupancy study that we recently partnered with Bâton Global and Reworc. And this study focuses on understanding the needs of our regional and downtown workforce. We had more than 5,100 participants from 18 organizations to help identify these trends specific to downtown and our DSM region. This is the first ever community level study of knowledge workers in the world. So pretty incredible. Happy to be leading the way as a community on this, and wouldn't be able to do that without our great partners, Bâton Global and Reworc. So happy to introduce you to Matthew Mitchell, who's a partner at Bâton Global, John Economos, who's a consultant at Bâton Global, as well as Kevin Schlueter, who is partner at Reworc. They will be leading us through this information today. We will have time for Q&A at the end of the session after their presentation, but please feel free to drop in questions into the chat as we go. This team, they are pros, and we'll be able to weave in answers to your questions as we go too. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Economos.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie. Hey, everybody. Thanks for hopping in with us today. We're excited to have you and to have a discussion. So we'll get through some slides here, but as Tiffany said, feel free to ask questions, throw them in the chat, unmute yourself when something comes up. We'll leave some time near the end to unpack some things together that are especially interesting in your minds. But to start, we'll just give you some background of really how we got here. This study came about during the beginning portions of the Downtown DSM Future Forward project that's ultimately creating a vision and action plan for downtown. And our point of view during that was really to infuse research and data into that process with a pandemic and futuristic perspectives in mind. That's a project that RDG is also a part of, and they did a great job of having inclusive public input opportunities. And we also felt that we needed to make sure that, corporate perspectives were heavily infused into that process. And as many of you on this call live and breathe, I mean, we know that corporate decisions majorly impact downtown, whether it's through policies, whether it's through amenities, real estate decisions, et cetera, et cetera. And those decisions are often made, of course, at the C-suite level, but we also know that those folks are actively seeking feedback from their own employees. And yet we also saw a pattern, and this isn't just unique to Des Moines, but this sort of wait and see approach during the pandemic. What's COVID going to do? What are some of the other organizations around the community going to do? And what are we going to do? And we just thought critically for a while about, how can we creatively provide some expedited clarity to our organizations in downtown, but also outside thereof, and bring some information to make accurate decisions with. And we found ourselves reflecting on some of the activities during that project and kind of plotted them on these axes here that you can see at the top of the slide around, what's a past activity we're looking at, things that have been done lately. What can we do that's kind of present, and also what are we doing to gather future insights? And on the other axis there, it's local information and regional, but also national and global information is what we wanted to gather. And we kind of plotted these things on the image there in the bottom left-hand corner, and thought of a cheesy analogy. And some of you have heard me say this before, so bear with me, but I think it's a good one. When you go to the doctor, right, you want them to know those world-class treatment solutions, the best practices, regardless of where they're happening in the world. What's an experimental sort of technology that we could maybe take advantage of that's shown some success in a different part of the world that might help me in whatever physical ailment I might be dealing with. But you also want your doctor to know you and your body specifically. And this really resonated with us and made us wonder, can we have a hyper-local data set to bring some of this clarity to the forefront? And luckily for us, we had another global company in our backyard, and it's Reworc. And I'll let Kevin talk about their solution and their philosophy that really served as the mechanism for this study.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody. So really, there's a lot of foundational research and science behind how to understand knowledge workforces. And that's really the foundation of the platform. There are very specific ways to go about doing that. And it relates to the things that we see on the screen here. But some of the things that are paramount are when we're diagnosing and understanding people at work, present and future, we really want to understand less what they want, but more, what are they doing so that we can properly support them so they perform at a high level. And you do that by focusing on things like behaviors, prioritization, and ultimately the economic output of what they do. This is how we all succeed within our communities and compete globally. And to do that, the question set needs to be psychologically safe. We need to ask things that are relevant and that have a high impact on how work is done and going to be done. So really, the way the research says to understand knowledge workers is we have to understand them through dialogue, through survey, or what we call a digital interview, because they're really unobservable. We have to understand prioritization and how people make decisions. So what we're really trying to diagnose are these aspects that you see on the screen. We don't need to get into detail. You can read them. But this, again, is very behavioral based. And what we did with our platform is we augmented and supplemented it with critical things about our community in Des Moines and the region. And finally, we were really trying to answer these questions. And on the left-hand side, it's how is work happening? How will it be done? How is it changing and evolving? And how do employees interact with their work sites? And what do they need out of their workplaces to do their best work? Especially when we consider that for knowledge workers, workplaces are nothing more than one of our big primary tools to help us perform and succeed. And increasingly, hybrid work, work from home, and distributed places are part of that toolkit. And the answers to those questions really help the partnership and the Bâton Global team and ourselves work on these things, and you all with the communications, the policies, and the investments directing where we need to pay attention.
So that's a little background for you. And if you can't tell, Kevin and I are in the same conference room together, and I'm getting a little whisper that our audio could be a little bit better. So moving forward, we'll do the unmute and the mute thing so we can use your headphones for good quality sound for all of you joining us.
It's tough. I'm gonna be quiet.
Yeah, cool. All right, so let's keep going here. A little bit of background. Tiffany touched on this a little bit ago, but our goal for really scale and achieving a relevant data set was about 1,000 respondents and 14 organizations. We ended up sending out 11,724 invitations to knowledge workers across the region. And this includes folks outside of downtown. We ended up with 18 participating organizations, both downtown and outside thereof, with a final respondent set of 5,197. So we were super jazzed about this. This is a fantastic response rate for any study, not to mention, something that is the first of its kind that we introduced to, C-suite leaders at these 18 organizations. And thanks to the great relationships and collaboration that the partnership has with all of you and your leaders at your various organizations, we ended up here. And this is a great place to be with a very actionable data set. So without further ado, we will dive into the insights, but I just encourage all of you to put into the chat, what are your biggest questions about our region, our downtown, our workforce, different trends? What's top of mind for you? Go ahead and just type that into the chat, and we'll keep an eye out for things that maybe we can camp out on a little bit more than others, because there is a lot of data we could unpack together. So we want to make this the best use of all of our time. Okay, so we have our 10 initial insights thus far that we've uncovered after a few weeks of analysis. And the 5 on the left are about the future of work, and the 5 on the right are about the future of downtown and really, space outside of the office. And so we'll go through these one by one. And again, feel free to throw in your comments, your questions, what might surprise you, what doesn't surprise you in the chat. So let's start with the future of work. Insight number 1 is what we're calling deep work. And I'll just read this to kind of orient all of us here. Workers really are placing highest value upon activities and behaviors that are more complex, collaborative, and judgment-based. We think this has impacts on education, on skill development, and on automation as well. So to think about the actual experience and how we came upon this insight, part of the survey, we put a list of 19 universal behaviors or activities in front of all of our respondents. And we said, hey, tell us the things that you do most frequently, the top 5 things you do most of the time on any given week. Okay, now that you've told us what you do mostly, rank those things in terms of how important they are to helping you achieve success in your role. And therefore, often what was helping their organization achieve success as well. And we'll just give you a little look at the actual data here. And I will zoom in and hopefully not make anybody dizzy as we do this. But just to bring this to life a little bit, this is the actual output at the community level. So all 5,200 employees, all 18 organizations, this is what we're looking at. And you can see those different behaviors listed: analyzing, programming, testing, searching for information, et cetera. The dark blue means that is super valuable and helps me achieve success in my role. Dark brown at the bottom, complete opposite, not really moving the needle, not as valuable in the minds of our knowledge workers. And then of course, the size of each bar means how many hours are being spent upon that every week. And we've taken these same activities and plotted them across 2 axes of complexity and collaboration. So you can see a lot of our big circles, and the dark blue is on the right side there. So more complex stuff that is really requiring some collaboration, some expertise, that judgment-oriented sort of work, as opposed to things on the left that are more about transactional activities and integration sorts of things. So that's where the deep work insight comes from. Along with that is insight number 2, which is just do it. You might have noticed formal meetings were one of those activities, and they were ranked the second lowest valued behavior. And yet we're spending a lot of time on those. You can see it right here. That's the second to bottom brown bar there. And just amidst the 5,200 or so folks, we're spending 17,000 hours a week on formal meetings, which our folks are saying are not really moving the needle. And so, yes, we need to be talking and pondering how we can attract talent to the state, to downtown, to our organizations, absolutely. But also, this data suggests that we have slack in the system. We have an opportunity to shift some of our knowledge workers' time away from a lower valued activity and towards some of that higher value work. There's productivity gains to be had there, probably some satisfaction gains as well. And I should be clear, what we're not saying is we need to abolish all meetings, but rather just be thoughtful about our communication strategies more robustly. So Kevin, I don't know if you want to unpack either of these 2 insights for our folks before we move on.
No.
Okay. All right, we're going to keep moving here. And here we are. Insight number 3, the total package. So we asked all of our respondents what was really important to them in terms of their organizational kind of attributes. And this is unique to the Reworc platform in that we're not just asking, hey, how satisfied are you with this or that? because what if we're asking about the wrong things? And so instead, we start with, hey, tell us what's important to you about your organization, or as we'll unpack here in a few minutes, what's important to you about maybe downtown. Now that you've told us what's important at your workplace or about your employer, how satisfied are you with those things that are of the highest importance? And it's these three things: salary, work-life balance, and employment benefits, that were top of the list. Very, very important, more so than everything else. And so it's really the foundation of an employee value proposition in our community. All of those had high satisfaction, except salary. There was an uptick in dissatisfaction for salary. Now, maybe that's not surprising given inflation and a question that many people would probably answer yes to, which is, do you want to make more money? But nonetheless, we think it's an interesting tidbit and something that we would encourage, additional exploration into a study of compensation in other markets, factoring in cost of living and inflation and all those sorts of things. But nonetheless, we have a very clear employee value proposition that we would encourage, all of our organizations to really take advantage of and make sure that they're talking about that total package and not just one of those things. Number 4 is a needed shift. So this is about culture, and this is often a thing that's talked about a lot, but hard to measure. And the way that the Reworc platform goes about this is rooted in the competing values framework. So we'll pull up a visual here in a moment to support this, but ultimately we asked, hey, what's the current culture in your organization today? And what should the culture be 5 years from now if your organization is to achieve its highest aspirations? And so today's culture is being described by our knowledge workers as one that puts emphasis upon performance, stability, control, and yet they feel that teamwork and innovation will be more necessary for maximum achievement in the future. So let's look at this together. This is, again, all of the data rolled up at our community level. Red is current culture, and we'll say blue/purple is desired culture of the future. That's being signaled by our knowledge workers as being very, very relevant and needed to achieve our goals. So let's orient ourselves here with this. Maybe we haven't had as much familiarity amidst our group of 50 some odd folks on this call right now. So the top of this framework is really about flexibility and dynamism, whereas the bottom is about stability and control. The left side is more about internal capabilities, whereas the right side focuses upon external opportunity. So you can see how we get to this 4-quadrant sort of framework. And what this data is telling us is as we mentioned on the last slide, you can see that our current culture is more weighted to the bottom, especially that bottom right corner, around competition and stability and having that control. And this makes sense, right? Knowing what our makeup is and what types of organizations we have in our region, financial services and the like, often is one of stability, process, control, risk aversion, et cetera. And yet you can see with that purple shape, our knowledge workers are saying that, to be our best, to achieve our goals in the future, we need to really lean into collaboration and being able to have innovative ideas and to play around with a little bit more appetite for risk. So I'll pause there and let Kevin unmute himself and give us a little bit extra color.
Thanks, John. Yeah, it's an interesting point when we look at the culture here and we couple that back with the behavioral data that we saw earlier. The entire workforce for the downtown community and the region at large and our economy is that the workforce says, hey, the things that we do that are very human, that add value to our organization are the things that are much more innovative, where we collaborate, where we create ideas, and the things that are complex, the hard things that we're working on that create value out in the marketplace for us. That is a big positive. People are ready for that change. They're ready for that continued evolution in the workforce. And that's a really, really important thing, like John said earlier, from an education standpoint, but also to understand where people's mindsets are, because that's the value of being human. That's the value of producing for our economy and being able to compete on the national and the global stage, of course. And both of those cultural and behavioral things point really in the very same direction.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. All right, so let's move on to our final insight on the future of work side before we shift over to the future of downtown. This is about remote work. And we asked folks in a variety of questions to understand where they were working. And in fact, where they could do that list of 19 activities, where could they could do those things best? Is it in the office? Are there some things that you can do better at home, et cetera, et cetera? And one of the takeaways, as you can read here, is that, you know, as you would expect, before the pandemic, we were working about 85% of the time in the office and 15% at home or somewhere else. At the time of this study, we were seeing a 40% work rate in the office, and 60% of our time was at home. And what's very interesting is that our folks also signaled that that is the proportion that they felt would be best for them moving forward as well. So a very clear signal that remote work is here to stay. What's interesting as well, as we slice and dice this across different segments with org level, executives and VPs, you know, shareholders, folks at the top of the food chain felt exactly opposite. They were actually saying that moving forward, I'm going to be at my best if I'm in the office 60% of the time and at home or somewhere else 40% of the time. So that coin kind of flips, and yet both of those ratios are very different, right, than our 85-15 baseline that we had been accustomed to for so many years. So there is a lot of interesting things to kind of delve into that in terms of what that does. But you can see this is the question that we put in front of our respondents about where they could work most effectively in the future. And here's that raw data, clear and present, right? You can see somewhere else in the office or maybe at my workstation, but that kind of bumps us up to that 40%, and yet at home 60% of the time. So this is a very complex, deep topic that we could unpack for another hour together. We won't be able to do that today, obviously, but there are good news stories within this data. One that allows us to start with accurate information to make decisions with, and to get to a point, and ultimately every organization will do this differently, right? Whether they adjust their policies and what that looks like, but also how are they repurposing their spaces to really resonate so that 40% of the time when I am at the office, it's 100% meeting my needs and my behaviors to make it the absolute best place for me to do some of those activities day to day. All right, so we're going to transition now, do a little time check as we hop over now into the downtown stories or insights rather that we've extracted thus far. And again, as a reminder, be curious for all of your thoughts and impressions about this. So I know Matthew is monitoring the chat very actively, so please lean into that. We want to hear from all of you during our time together. So let's hop into the 5 insights about downtown. Number 6 here is memorable experiences. So just as we did in the kind of organizational setting where we led with Reworc's philosophy, right, of starting with what's important to someone and then asking about sentiment, we did that with downtown. And we said, hey, what is important to you for downtown to offer? And now that you've told us what's important, well, how satisfied are you with those things? And cultural events, socializing, and outdoor recreation were a very clear set of 3 of things that are driving utilization of downtown, but also driving high satisfaction and continued priority or importance. And we'll flip over to that and show you this data very quickly. So here are the things that we put in front of folks in terms of downtown attributes or characteristics. And you can see, you know, the dark red is I'm very unsatisfied. Dark green is I'm very satisfied. And of course, everything in the middle there. And this is the unique part, right? We don't just have sentiment data, but we have data about importance. And that's super critical when we get to a juncture here in the weeks and months ahead, when we start asking, okay, so what? What are we going to do about this? And the importance data helps us prioritize our limited time and resources and investments into the things that are of most importance to our hyper local, folks and knowledge workers in this case. And so you can see for your own eyes, we have that with cultural events and socializing. There's transportation that sneaks in there, but why we didn't call that out on our slide was it's not as highly satisfied as those other three things. And we did have some branching questions that explored transportation further that we'll touch on here in a minute. So let me go back here. We'll keep moving along. Number 7 is generational approach. So demographics led by age are really a driving source of variation of preferences and utilization patterns. We're able to really slice and dice this data set in a lot of different ways with Reworc's platform. And so in a couple examples here, it's very clear in the data that folks in their 20s are using downtown more than anybody else. Folks in their 60s really care about daily amenities. Something that also resonated with me, given my mother is in this demographic. Folks in their 60s also really care about parking. And we asked a lot of branching questions about what would make that more appealing to really remove some barriers to bring more and more folks downtown. So some really interesting insights there, but it leads us to be, again, very action oriented and have some pointed discussions about what are we doing to appeal to our generational mixes when we think about downtown and its offerings. Number 8 is build it and they will come. Everybody, I think, can appreciate a Field of Dreams reference, but we asked all of our folks, hey, all of the things that you told us were important to you about downtown, if we continued to make improvements in those things, would it impact your utilization rate at all, or maybe not? We wanted to understand where we at a saturation point for how many folks would end up coming downtown and spending their time there. And 86% of our respondents said, yeah, I would utilize downtown more with continued improvements. So this is a fantastic number. It leads us to start thinking about how we can continue to communicate and inform our knowledge workers, our residents about the things that are happening. How can we supplement and bring new voices to the table for the folks that maybe aren't as plugged into the business records, newsletters, or the things that the partnership might be pushing out, or the updates that their employers put on their intranets? Like what else can we do? What other voices can we raise up to make sure that we're informing and equipping people to take advantage of the awesome things down here and surrounding downtown for that matter? We also think this number would be very attractive to developers that might be pondering different projects in Des Moines or in other markets. This is a very attractive number to say, hey, we have a lot of folks that would love to take advantage of this new development or this new project, et cetera. Seeing some chats come through, so this is great news. I'm going to read the chats. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin to see if any of these 3 stories, Kevin, what else do you want to share and raise up that I might have missed?
I think we have the chats covered. We'll grab those as soon as you're through the 10, and then we'll go back as questions. I kind of documented those with Matthew, and we'll touch base on those.
Sweet. Awesome. All right, let's keep moving here. We have a couple more to share. So number 9 is step by step. We asked a lot of questions about transportation, as I said, and one of those was inquiring on the current ratio between walking and driving. And as you can see here, 50% of our respondents signaled a desire for more walkability versus drivability. And another 32% said that today's ratio between walking to get around versus driving was good with them. That only leaves 18% of our respondents that signaled a desire for more driving, more parking, et cetera. When we mesh these things together with some of the other questions about mobility and parking and infrastructure, it signals this desire for an experience that's taking advantage of concentrated parking amenities so that I can park once, walk to all of the places that I would like to visit, and go back then to my vehicle rather than the in and out, finding multiple parking spots multiple times. This is also encouraging. We have the infrastructure for this. can think of probably a few parking ramps that are centrally located. So some of the opportunities that started to rise to the top in the data were, one of them, to be specific, was improving signage and giving folks more information to know where I can park, when I can park there, how much it costs. There was a signal across a variety of transportation options for mobile apps to give that information. And I believe a Park DSM app is on the horizon. So that should resonate quite nicely according to this data set. Last but not least, building for the future. So as you can kind of see amidst the insights that we've shared thus far, work is changing. There's no question. But how people are using downtown is also changing. But luckily for us, these trends are evolving in parallel. We talked about folks' desire to use downtown for socializing and for cultural events. Well, there's similar sentiment in the workplace context as well. And I'll just jump to that right now. We asked this question: when working from home, what do you miss about working in the office? Very clearly, as you can see at the top, social interactions was a very clear number one. And so if we flip back to this insight, this is just a kind of a culmination of these things, and that we have an opportunity to take advantage of folks' desire for connection, both at work and downtown, as opposed to just being a place for folks to get their X's and O's done for their day-to-day work responsibilities. So we've of course been a community that's relied upon a population of 80,000 workers daily. And if we're seeing these shifts in remote work and a signal that will continue, that's not all for only that we don't have to be necessarily concerned about that, because there are very clear opportunities for us to appeal to this need for connection, both inside and outside of work. So with that, as we start to close and unpack some of the things in the chat, this is really where we are. It's now what, and I'll let Kevin give us some additional insights here. But I just appreciate the encouragement that the partnership and a lot of other stakeholders have been posing along this journey and throughout this process. Is, hey, the data is super cool and super actionable, but we need to really put it to use. And it's meetings like this where we're excited to talk about it, but we want to utilize it, right? We want to put it to work. And so that's where we would just love and really appreciate all of you to lean in here for our final 10, 15 minutes or so, and tell us what really resonates for you, and what other questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, John. And there's the questions. While I look at the questions on chat and answer, I'm going to answer a couple of the original ones, and then you look at the one from Tim Leach that's on there, and I don't know what the new one is, and let's discuss those. But let's remind everybody in the chat. The first question, which is actually the second, had to do with deep work. And what do we mean by deep work? But more specifically, how do we support the workers that want to do that, quote, deep work? And that's an excellent question. I don't know where that one came from, but it's outstanding. If our people see that as an employment base, the things that we do that take our brain, that are very human, that are very interactive, where we're solving complex problems by using others to develop things out in the marketplace, that's a very different way of working, and it's a behavior. Some of the ways that we need to support that are in the workplace, for example, and this is where maybe some of this hybrid tension and balance is coming about. In doing some of the deep work that we may be doing, sometimes now, as work habits have changed, the home environment in some instances may support focus, privacy, the ability, for example, to use my own coffee and restrooms and things like that, where I can get some things done and be a high performer at doing those. Because maybe the office environment isn't suitable for that. That's not an absolute, that's just a generalization of that. So that's one way where those things can be supported and where hybrid may work, for example. It also calls to using different tools and technologies, office environments, and how we manage people certainly and lead them in terms of what we do within our office structures themselves. and support those characteristics. And so some of those things may need to change. And those are process improvements as well as work environment improvements. And one of the things that John also noted earlier was this crush of formal meetings that we have, which is almost 10, 12, 13% of our total work time in the community and the region at large. And if you think about that, what we need to be able to do and what that really is calling out, let's learn how to communicate better, more efficiently, and you do things in a more distributed manner. Those things will support, to go back to the question, will start to support those knowledge workers in doing the deep work that they know is so important and so valuable to themselves, their companies, and the marketplace. So hopefully that gives a little bit of insight to that. If there's more questions, let's talk about those. The second question, which was kind of actually related a little bit, was describe a little bit about the differences between kind of executive and staff and what those are. Essentially what those are just behavioral differences. Let's be honest. And we see this a lot globally in data sets. The way executives work is different than boots on ground or rank and file or staff that are doing, because we're doing different things. It's like saying the way that the accounting department works is very different than the way that the sales department works. This is critically important when we're looking at hybrid work and what to do. I think it's dangerous to start to paint everyone in our organizations or our community with the same brush. There are companies and departments within organizations that work differently, that need access to office environments, that need access to interpersonal communication that is physical or in person. But there are other teams based on varying differences, demographics, ages, the type of work they do, that can work in a distributed or a home working environment a little bit better. And so when we look at our people within our organization, look at them almost on a team by team basis and make sure that we're giving them the tools, aka work environments, technologies, management support, and those types of things on a case by case basis within those departmental structures. So that's really how we deal with those differences. And it's not totally surprising that executives who tend to be very interpersonal work together, say, hey, we need to be in the office more. But that doesn't necessarily mean that other groups have to do that if that isn't the same requirement or support system in place. So let me stop there. Hopefully that answered the questions. We can ask if there's more, and I'll turn it back over to you, John, to talk about Tim's question.
Awesome. Okay, we're back at this slide here, and I'm looking, Tim, your question was about an age breakdown on walkability, versus driving. The answer is yes, we do have those breakdowns. Off the top of my head, and we could even just pull up the platform and look at this together. Let me do that here for us. If I can get out, there we are. All right, so bear with me here. We'll go to our question about walking versus driving, if I can find it. Here it is. All right. So Tim, that question, that data is over here on the right side. This is pretty slick. We'll just click through this pretty quickly, but you can see here's our 20-year-olds, 30, 40s, 50s, 60s. So across the board, Tim, you're seeing those bars are larger up here as opposed to down here, just simply put. So they're moving a little bit, but there's a lot of desire across the board for that step-by-step experience, that experience for walking between amenities and destinations. Good question.
So the next question really related to the organizations, and let me read that again. What can we do as individuals and organizations, but also as a community, to kind of create this common goal of success? And that's a great question, because I think one of the things that this study and its data are particularly showing is that two things are evolving really in parallel. And this is really clear. The evolution of work is evolving in parallel with what we expect out of our communities, whether it's the downtown corridor or the region as a whole, and the things that we expect. So the answer and the success will be driven by, in short, the evolution of the workplace. And that's the technology we use and those things, and the evolution of our communities, of which this particular study calls out both of those things and points us in a very clear direction forward. And if those things continue to evolve, the data is very clear here that people respond very favorably and be very excited about the future of Des Moines because it will be meeting their needs. So that's a good question, but that's the high level way to answer that very specific question. And there's work to do in those, but it will have very positive economic impact because it's just the next phase in our maturation or our development as workforces and as people.
I would, thanks, Kevin. I'll jump in to help address the question of the so what, now what, how can we help and work together? And would just say a couple of points on that. The first is, as you have referenced already, this information, this data is helping us with creating an actionable plan for the future of downtown, but it's also helping us with driving the partnership's overall priorities and report card goals, meaning that we are intentionally reviewing these data points, this information that we've learned through this study to be able to help us make informed decisions as we march forward as an organization. And that means really leveraging the influence and reach, the network of our investors and members. So a couple of right now action items would be, please do your part in helping support local businesses and especially getting people downtown. Help us create more fear of missing out, FOMO moments downtown, whether that is you attending something like we held the Great DSM hot air balloon hunt on Saturday night. In looking at the data, that was a high point in foot traffic in downtown. And certainly the nice weather contributed. The Hoops and Hops event contributed to that, as did post St. Patty's Day celebrations. But we also had the hot air balloon hunt. And what we know is that did work. It did drive people downtown, draw people downtown. So you can help us with getting the word out about those sorts of events and also attend yourself, please. Please support these events, these cultural happenings. Again, the data supports that these will draw more people. And the more that we are all talking about how cool these things are and posting about it in our social media feeds, we're inviting others, our neighbors, our friends, our networks to attend these. It is very helpful and it does work. And so that's very short term. Also, as you are out and about in downtown, if you could please take the time to support local. These businesses downtown need us, and their success is our collective success. And as both Kevin and John have said, a strong downtown leads to a strong region. And we know this, there's data that backs it up, that a strong downtown will help us with drawing in new talent to the region overall, whether or not they work downtown or not. So then longer term, the action item really relates back to the downtown vision plan, which will have a preliminary, that initial report in the next month or so. And then also as it relates to overall partnership, regional work, there's an opportunity for us to move forward. And we look forward to hearing your feedback and input on ideas you have to help us collectively move forward based off of the data that's been shared here. So there's much more to come. This is just the start, but really appreciate the question. And it really will take all of us working together to continue to move forward.
Awesome. Yep. Thanks, Tiffany. Well said. And I'm seeing another question or comment, Matthew. Thank you for that about parking. And yeah, I think we have another 5 minutes. We're going to give 5 minutes back to everybody and end a little early, but we still have a couple of more moments for anything else. We'll talk about parking here for a moment, but let's let this be the last call for any other questions or comments or ideas from the 50 some odd brains on this call. So yeah, parking, it's a common question and topic. We do have quite a bit of it, at least in my view, but it's our study was less about the X's and O's of amounts and calculating what we need and what we don't need. But I think broadly speaking, the use will look different than it has, knowing that work is looking different than it has in the past. Matthew, your last piece there, what more can we do to address a perceived parking problem really alludes to what our data does uncover, which is a desire for more signage, like I spoke of earlier. And, we have some really creative people in our neck of the woods, in our community. And, We think there's opportunities both for parking signage, also skywalk signage, to take advantage of some of our local art talent, to make some very engaging, vibrant, creative ways to give people orientation about where they are, where they can go, what's around the corner, things like that. So definitely some low-hanging fruit that could help us squeeze even more juice out of our collective existing infrastructure, whether it's parking ramps or other things. Okay, last call. I'm not seeing anything else come through in the chat. So Tiffany, I'll hand it back over to you for any closing remarks.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, John. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Matthew, for running point on the chatterbox. Appreciate it. Safe travels home. Just want to thank everyone for making time for this webinar today. And thanks to Mike Jefferson for his leadership on this webinar. But as again, mentioning next steps, we will be incorporating these findings into the Downtown DSM Future Forward Vision Plan and Action Plan, which will be shared in the near future. Additionally, we're sharing this information with major employers, partnership board members, our investors, Downtown DSM board members, and many other stakeholders, because we need and want your feedback and additional insights from you. So this will all be incorporated into our future goals here at the Greater Des Moines Partnership. And we have been, as mentioned just a bit ago, have already begun implementing some of the action items that have been identified through the study, including creating more of those FOMO moments, those surprise and delight pop-up activations downtown specifically. So again, action steps you can take right now. Support downtown. Please choose to come downtown for work, recreation, attend events, support restaurants, retailers, amenities, and then tell your friends about it. Share the word. And speaking of coming downtown, this Saturday from 9 until 7, we have the Dsm Book Festival, which will be at Capitol Square. It is going to be a phenomenal day. It's free. Stop down, attend, hear from some great national authors that will be here, but also have really fun activities planned for the whole family. Again, free to attend at Capitol Square from 9 to 7. Look forward to seeing you there, if not at one of our other fun happenings in downtown or throughout the region overall. So thanks again to Reworc and Bâton Global for your great leadership on this first of its kind study. And thanks again, everybody, for making time for this. Have a great day.